Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, and I've got to say something here. Does AI just kind of sort of feel so 5 minutes ago? I don't, like a real thing, a real question here, a real YouTuber to viewer question here. Are you still all so excited about AI at this point? Or is it just kind of getting tired and boring? I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But anyways, I don't know. This is vaguely interesting. OpenAI hits pause on its meta killer. I don't really know if it's a meta killer, but they were going to be having an open weight model. So we hear about open source models, which probably isn't correct. It's an open weight model. So basically they were going to be releasing this open weight model for anybody to use, and they are pausing that. This is coming from Gizmodo. I do think it is an interesting thing when you think about words, because we've been hearing about these open source models. So Llama 3 is open source, and Kimi K2 is open source, and DeepSeek, I think, is open source. But one of the things with open source is the key component to open source is that you're supposed to be able to see the source code. Right? That's what we wanted 20 some odd years ago, right? We spent a lot of money buying crap from Microsoft. The crap would break. We'd have no idea why it broke or why it was vulnerable, and that became a big issue. So I remember, if you go back 25 years ago in the open source community, there was the argument between free as in free speech or free as in free beer, and that was an actual argument. Many of us were fine with paying for a product. We just wanted to make sure what the hell the product was actually doing. Anyways, we now get into this modern world, and open source, basically, it's weird how words get taken over by certain groups. So there's like the open source initiative or whatever, and so they've taken over the word open source. But I remember when we used to argue about, like, when we talked about open source, does that mean open source code? You can view the source code regardless of whether or not you have to buy it, or does it mean it's free, right? Free speech or free beer. Open source initiative comes in, they claim the right to define what open source is, and so they say it should be both viewable, the source code should be viewable, and it should be free. But anyways, the interesting thing as we move forward now is they start talking about these open source models, and what becomes interesting is, with these models, I mean, you have the code, right? And they're giving you the ability to futz with the weights and maybe the biases. So when you're, I don't know, weights and biases or what weights and biases are. I don't have the brain power to explain that. If you know what it is, you know what it is. Anyways, but the interesting thing is many of them, they're not giving you the training data. Right, so basically what happens is you take the training data, you run it through a neural network with these weights and biases to get these outputs. And you go back and you do this whole training, recursive training, all that kind of stuff until it starts giving you what it is that you want. And so an interesting thing is, should you call a model open source? Even if it's free, should you call it open source if you don't have access to that training data? Because if you don't have access to that training data, you don't really understand how that model got trained. You may have all the bits and bytes, it might be there for you to see, but what the hell does that actually mean? Anyways, I think that is an interesting thing when you start looking at ChatGPT and they're talking about an open weight model. That functionally actually makes more sense. The idea of, again, these weights and biases, the idea that you can futz with the weights, that makes sense, right? Hey, you can use this for any purpose and you can futz with the weights. Is that open source? I would argue not in the spirit of open source, but that is just one of those things to kind of consider. Anyways, we take a look at this. OpenAI is delaying the release of its much anticipated open weight AI model, citing the need for, quote, additional safety tests and last minute concerns over, quote, high risk areas. CEO Sam Altman announced on X, formerly Twitter, the decision lands in the middle of a brutal AI arms race, particularly with Meta, which has been aggressively poaching OpenAI talent and championing open source models like Llama 3. Again, are they actually open source? What is the definition of that? So the idea here is that OpenAI was supposed to come out with this Openweight model that anybody could use for any reason, and they're pulling that back for some reason. He is saying for additional safety tests and higher risk areas, which becomes a very interesting question. Like when you start talking about these safety tests, right, these risks, and you start getting pushback from model. Like it's weird. It's weird. So I use ChatGPT, right? So when you look at my thumbnails, I am not an amazing artist. I just simply can plug in a sentence long prompt into ChatGPT. I can give it a picture and it modifies it. Right? Well, what's interesting there is so I grab these pictures of famous people. Xi, I use a lot of Xi with crowns on his head. I use Xi, I use Trump, I use Elon Musk, Sam Altman, whoever else, right? And what's kind of curious with the whole safety deal is you have to say the prompt properly. Like it's weird. Like if I put like Trump in there and I have I put the prompt in like make him a clown, that will violate the safety policy. If I put Trump there and have dress him like a clown, it'll dress him like a clown. Right? There's all this weird kind of stuff when you use ChatGPT, especially on a daily basis, and you use it, again, to modify pictures of actual people, and you run into these weird safety areas. So an interesting question to think about with this OpenAI model is what do these safety tests actually mean? What are the guardrails for the system? And so that is something to be considering if you're going to be putting this into some kind of platform that you're going to implement is do you want more or fewer guardrails, right? Is this going to be a platform for not safe for work, God knows what, and so you want it to be able to do whatever you want it to be able to do? Or is this going to be a platform for kids, right? So they want to, create pictures of Grimace or Gonzo or something like that. Basically, how many guardrails do you want there to be? And I think that's going to be an interesting question. The other interesting question here is how they're going to document it. How will you, as the implementer, understand the difference in guardrails between all of these models? So if you look at these models so many times, they have these spreadsheets, they have these god-awful spreadsheets about how good the model is, right? How effective it is for coding, how effective it is to cheat on the SATs, how effective it is to write a term paper, things like that, right? And they have all these now standardized tests, and it tells you. One of the interesting things as we move forward, one of my arguments, is that most of these models at this point in time are good enough for most people. That the concern now is more about things like resource consumption and that type of deal. And one of the things to consider then is as we move forward, how are they going to define guardrails and how are they going to define safety? If I look at it and I figure for most of my projects, frankly, any LLM that was created a year ago is probably fine, right? I'm not worried, right, on whether this can code at 95% and this can code at 96%. I really don't give a damn, right? I care about how much it costs, how fast the response rate is, that type of thing. But think about things like guardrails. Like one of the interesting things is like, oh, okay, will this model talk about sexual subjects? Will this model talk about gender subjects? Will this model talk about political subjects? Will it talk about blue hair political subjects or will it talk about red hat political subjects, right? I think those kinds of things are going to become more and more valuable for people to understand where the guardrails and the quote unquote safety is, right? Because you think about with safety models and safety, right? The idea being, well, the model shouldn't teach somebody how to create an explosive. Well, on the other hand, these models are now being implemented by the government. The models are literally being implemented by the DoD. So if you're an ordnance disposal person with the DoD, it might actually be important for you to be able to ask how to create a specific explosive. Like, Private Bob forgot one of the explosive compounds. I've got this component and I'm supposed to have 4 components to build the bomb. Fucking Private Bob forgot one of the components again. So I've only got 3 components to make a bomb. Hey, Grok. we were supposed to have these 4 components. Private Bob is a dipshit and forgot one of the components. I only have these 3 components left. How do I create a bomb that can kill somebody with these 3 components? Right? Right? For a teenager in high school that wears long black jackets in the middle of July, you probably don't want the AI to answer that question. Again, ordnance disposal or somebody like that, you do want them to answer the question. So I think it's going to be very interesting with these models is the idea of like how do we define what they do so that we can figure out the most effective models for whatever tasking we're giving them. The model, which was slated to drop this week, would be OpenAI's first major Openweight system, meaning developers would be free to download and use the model underlying code and data weights to build their own apps, research projects, or commercial tools. But as also been pointed out, once these models are released, they can't be pulled back. Yes, because remember, AI is more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Has Sam Altman told you how dangerous AI is today? Hate these people. That's the nature of open source, and it's exactly why this delay is raising eyebrows across the AI community. Quote, while we trust the community will build great things with this model, once weights are out, they can't be pulled back, Altman wrote on X. This is new for us, and we want to get it right. The curious thing with all of this really is what is right. You know, when we talk about safety, what the hell are we talking about? When we're talking about safety, are we talking about it will not tell you how to create a chemical weapon or that it won't misgender somebody? I'm just saying those are different areas. Those are different areas. Let's see here. Open sourcing models accelerates innovation, but also raises the risk of misuse. Interesting question of misuse, misinformation, and untraceable custom versions. That's why the decision to delay, while frustrating to many, signals that OpenAI is trying to tread cautiously, especially as criticism around AI safety and model leaking intensifies. What's the real reason for the delay? According to developer chatter online, the delay may have been triggered by a major technical issue discovered just before launch. The rumored model was expected to be smaller than Kimi K2, the new open-weight model from Chinese AI startup Moonshot AI that reportedly clocks in at nearly 1 trillion parameters, but still, quote, super powerful. According to early testers, Kimi K2, which is taking on ChatGPT with impressive coding capabilities at a lower price, was released on July 11th. OpenAI's delay comes at a time when Meta is eating its lunch, at least in the open source department. Mark Zuckerberg's company has released increasingly powerful open-weight models like Llama 3, all while quietly hiring away top OpenAI researchers. The talent war is real, and it's affecting timelines and strategy across the board. By delaying the release, OpenAI might be hoping to avoid a flawed launch that could dent its credibility at a critical moment, but it also risks falling further behind Meta, which has already become the go-to platform for developers looking to build with transparent, modifiable AI tools. OpenAI hasn't offered a new timeline for the release. The silence is fueling speculation that the delay could last weeks. If retraining is truly on the table, it could push the launch closer to the fall. So anyways, that is what's going on with OpenAI's Openweight model. When will it come out? Who the hell knows? What's the problem with it? Who the hell knows? When you're able to get your hands on it, what will it do? You're going to have to find out. You're going to have to figure it out. So yeah. I wonder how many people actually care. Like in this point in time. You know, again, you go back 2 years ago. You go 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever else. Like AI, LLM. How many people are desperate for an open weight model from OpenAI at this point? Right? When do we get to AI saturation? Right? K2 is out. There was another model. Baidu, I think, put out another model not that long ago. You have Llama 2 out there. You have Mistral. I think Mistral is open source or whatever. At this point in time, you have so many of these open models. How much of a value is there now for OpenAI to drop theirs? It's a bit of an interesting question, and I'll be curious. I'll be curious to see how this goes moving forward. I think we are getting to peak AI. I think we're getting to peak LLM at this point, and we're going to start to see the market implode, as we're seeing in the rest of the tech world, right? In the rest of the tech world, everything outside of AI, they're doing major layoffs, they're doing voluntary exits, they're just eliminating employees by hook or by crook, right? They're eliminating employees, and they're just they're cutting investments to the bone. My question is how close are we to that point with a lot of these AI projects? Are they getting us to the places where we think they're going to get us, right? It's the example that I always give for VR, right? So I'm of the generation of Lawnmower Man, right? Lawnmower Man came out when I was in high school. It looks horrible now. I remember when that was cutting edge. You're like, wow, look at these special effects. Anyways, it's a different time period. You know, I remember when I was in a community college, and they brought in these VR games. So to show people show students the future, there were these VR games, and you would like shoot pterodactyls. So you had this huge fucking VR headset on, and it was bright colors, and you're in this little circular thing, you know, like a gun, and you put this thing on, and you shot pterodactyls. And so the thing was, like, when you looked at Lawnmower Man, you looked at the shooting pterodactyls, man, the quality, it was just so horrible. It was just so, the lag, the latency, it was just so crappy. So there was a thing, you know, there was this idea in your mind. Like, wow, this seems cool. I'm sure once they perfect the technology, it'll be amazing, right? So you go from shooting pterodactyls to then, you know, 10 years later, some better stuff comes out, and some better stuff comes out, and some better stuff comes out. And I remember sitting there. There was a CES before COVID. Maybe it was 2008. Maybe it was 2008 or 2019. Anyways, so I go to CES, and there's all these VR vendors there. Maybe it was 2020. Anyway, whatever. But the curious thing is that they had finally gotten 4K screens for VR, right? So you had 4K screens, and you had iris tracking, or basically eyeball tracking. So there's this whole process. It does the best resolution wherever your eyeball is actually looking, and worst resolution around that. It's a resource saving process. Anywho, I remember I finally sat down, and there was a number of companies at CES. I sat down and used like 5 different of these just really high-end VR headsets. And as I sat there with these amazing headsets that did 4K and did all of that, I was like, wow, this sucks. You know, I sat there with these things on my face, and I was like, wow, like the resolution is amazing. The performance is amazing. The lack of lag and latency is amazing. And this sucks. I know I don't want this shit on my face. Anybody who's followed me for a length of time remembers this period, like 5 or 6 years ago, right? Where it was like, wow, it's just like suction cupping a 4K screen to my face. Yeah, this is horror. This is just a miserable experience. But that was it, right? There was the point before. There was the point when you saw Lawnmower Man or you shot pterodactyls, and you had this idea of, wow, if this actually was up to spec or what, it would be amazing. And then there's a point, you suction cup a 4K screen to your face, and you realize, oh, it's cool, but it's also miserable. No, there is no part of me that wants this damn thing on my head any longer than possible. And I wonder if we're going to start hitting that point with a lot of this AI stuff, right? There's this massive push for AI. Mark Zuckerberg, right, putting hundreds of billions of dollars a day. I mean, with his success with the metaverse, he never fails, right? So he wants to put hundreds of billions of dollars into AI. He's creating these massive, there's going to be a 5 gigawatt AI data center, whatever the hell that actually means at the end of the day. But as they keep pushing AI, I keep looking at it. I'm not saying it doesn't improve some stuff. When I create thumbnails, look, I'll pay $20 a month for ChatGPT to create thumbnails for me. I mean, there's a value there. yeah, I get the responses from Google or whatever. And I've got to say, the more and more I use these AI products, the more I have this sinking feeling I had with VR 5 or 6 years ago of, I mean, there's a place, don't get me wrong, there's a place for it and all that, but I don't know. But I'm probably the only one. Apparently, I'm the only one that is not absolutely impressed with AI every day of the week. So anyways, what do you think about this? What do you think about OpenAI pausing its Openweight model? What do you think about it dropping its Openweight model after everybody else in the world has already dropped their Openweight or open source model? What do you think about this idea of calling things, is it open source or is it Openweight? Put your thoughts down below. Remember, whether it's a thumbs up, a thumbs down, a great comment, or a horrible comment, it is all the interaction as far as YouTube is concerned. So give us some interactions down below. Remember, silicondojo.com. We do fireside chats there where I bring in real technology professionals. We're going to have David Cox, VP of AI models at IBM. We're going to have him on Thursday. If you want to sign up for that, you go to silicondojo.com. And we just had a conversation with Louis Rossman, and that recorded conversation is on the channel. So you can just go to interviews under the channel and take a look at that. And with that, see y'all later.